Hi there, I'm Scott Yonker. I was invited here by Justin to share my story, my testimony about what God's been doing in my life this past year or so. And of course, that springs out of my life before that, the sad stories, the good stories, all the good, the bad, and the ugly. Well, I've been in Christ for several decades, maybe a good 30 years. And, I always wanted to be married. My dream, even when I was a teenager, while my other friends had, dreams of being a, pro surfer or rock star or rich and famous, whatever it be. I just had a more simple idea. I just wanted a loving relationship, where we could share our lives together. And but I wanted that in a way that, I was hasty. I just wanted to try and force that, and I jumped into relationships, a little too soon and too hastily, and lacking wisdom, and even, letting the desires of my flesh drive me rather than wisdom that God had given to me. I came to Christ when I was around 20, and but not fully trusting in God, I made some pretty bad decisions. So the first half of my life was pretty much a sad story of one failure after another. Getting married and divorced. But then things changed. When I just realized, okay, I can't do that anymore. I need to break this pattern. And so I just said I'm not going to have any relationships, any dating or anything like that for at least 3 to 5 years, and maybe not ever, because my standard had changed by then. I wasn't just going to settle for less. Matter of fact, my standard was so high it was ridiculous. I figured I'd probably never find someone that met that specific criteria of what I would settle for, and I thought, well, fine, then I'll just never get married again if someone like that doesn't exist. But I was surprised to see that when I met Celeste, who would become my wife, she really was checking down the list, and I was surprised. It was very surprising, a pleasant surprise though, but almost unbelievable. And but she really did. Even by the time we got married, there was no bad surprises. It was only confirmation of what I already knew, what she already shown of the person she was. So I've really never even seen a marriage as good as what we had. And I could say so much about that. It was such a model. And you can hear I'm talking in kind of in the past tense because she had passed away, and we had the best 10 plus years of my life. I mean, that was like the season of my life that was, all those years before, so terrible, so sad. Not it wasn't all bad. There was good memories, but for the most part, a sad story. And now we have a wonderful, blessed story of a loving relationship, an exemplary model for others to see how good a marriage could actually be. And so I enjoyed that. I always knew that it may not last forever. Tomorrow's never guaranteed, so I always lived each and every day like that could be my last. And I'm glad I did, because I didn't take anything for granted. I didn't take her for granted. I didn't neglect her or misuse or abuse or anything like that. And because God had shown me, He had taught me through those failures in the past how to be worthy of a woman like Celeste. Losing her, was a major blow, because she was a very, very special gift from God. And I was able to take the hit, and for the most part, most of that first year after losing her, I was holding up pretty well, considering what kind of loss that was. But after a while, the grief really just started wearing on me, and this is kind of where God stepped in a way like I'd never experienced before. We really should live like this is our last day, because it might be. We don't know. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. And the one thing, when people, the most common regret that a lot of people have when they've lost a loved one is like, I just wish I would have made more time for them. I wish I wouldn't have taken them for granted. And I don't have those kind of regrets. And God, like I said, God taught me how to really appreciate what I had, and He taught me that by, experiencing the bad is what helps you really appreciate the good when you finally get the good. So that is one thing, but another is that when you do endure loss like that, it's not the end of the world. It's definitely a major change and major loss. It is. And yet, when we have the sure hope of Christ, not just a fanciful, wishful thinking, but the sure hope of Christ, the hope of the resurrection, that's something that really will hold us up. And even when we do get overwhelmed with sorrow and grief, and that's eventually what happened to me. I was, like I said, I was holding up fairly well through it, pretty well actually. But then eventually it did wear me down, the grief. It got so heavy that I just spiraled. And maybe it had partly to do with I just was getting a little too busy with things, and I wasn't pressing into God the way I really should have been, especially for that time, for what I was going through. And I just started to spiral down, and it didn't seem like there was any amount of positive thinking or positive activity that was going to help that. I just kept spiraling down until I was at a point where I was completely on my face and helpless. The only recourse I had was to just cry out to God to rescue me. And that's when God stepped in. Not like God wasn't there before. It certainly was. But God suddenly came in a way that I'd never experienced before. And this is what makes this whole season both the worst of times and the best of times, because the worst of times obviously is losing my wife. The best of times is experiencing God in a way that I never quite had before. And so this is the way God can work. And I haven't even gotten the details of that, but I'm just kind of generalizing right now about God, how God can really step in the worst time, the darkest times in your life.